I'm Catherine Collins, 32, and I never thought my own sister would become my worst enemy. At what was supposed to be a celebratory family dinner, my black card declined as Jessica smirked. "Stop pretending you're rich, Cat." Little did she know, that humiliating moment would uncover her decade-long betrayal, $550,000 stolen from our family, and a web of lies that would unravel her perfect facade. What happened next shocked everyone. Hey there, before I dive into this wild family drama, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If you enjoy real-life family revenge stories like mine, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more shocking family revelations. Trust me, you won't believe how this ends. My sister never saw karma coming this fast. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston with my parents and younger sister Jessica. Our childhood seemed picture-perfect from the outside. Dad worked as a financial advisor, Mom managed a boutique downtown, and Jessica and I were just 4 years apart. Close enough to share clothes and secrets, but far enough apart that we developed distinct personalities and friend circles. From early on, the differences between us were stark. I was the studious one who spent weekends with my nose in books, joining math competitions and debate clubs. Jessica was effortlessly popular, charismatic, and socially gifted. She could walk into a room and instantly command attention, while I preferred staying in the background, observing rather than participating. My parents never explicitly favored either of us, but there was an unspoken acknowledgement that Jessica was the special one, the daughter whose school plays everyone rearranged schedules to attend, whose accomplishments were announced to extended family with particular pride. "Jessica's got the Collins charm," my dad would say, beaming as she effortlessly worked a room at family gatherings. Meanwhile, I was praised for being responsible and mature, compliments that felt hollow when I was 16 and longing for the same easy admiration my sister received. Despite these differences, we weren't at odds during our childhood. I admired Jessica's confidence, and she occasionally sought my help with homework or advice on how to handle difficult situations that required more thought than impulse. We shared a bathroom, fought over clothes like normal sisters, and kept each other's secrets from our parents. There was a foundation of trust, however imperfect, that I believed would endure into adulthood. When I left for college at MIT to study computer science, Jessica was entering her freshman year of high school. Those 4 years of physical distance created an emotional gap that widened imperceptibly each time I returned home for holidays. Jessica was becoming the queen bee of her high school, dating the football captain, and being crowned homecoming queen, living the quintessential American high school experience that seemed straight out of a movie. Meanwhile, I was thriving in my own way at MIT, finding my tribe among fellow tech enthusiasts, and developing my first successful app during my junior year. It wasn't glamorous work. I spent countless nights coding until dawn, subsisting on ramen and coffee, but I was building something I believed in. When my first app sold to a larger tech company for $75,000 during my senior year, it felt like validation of my path. I returned home for Christmas break that year, excited to share my news. My parents were impressed, if somewhat confused about the technical aspects of my achievement. Jessica, however, seemed almost dismissive. "So some company paid you to do their computer homework?" she asked over dinner, twirling spaghetti around her fork with practiced nonchalance. "It's not homework, Jess. I built a program that helps optimize supply chains for small businesses. It saves them thousands in logistics costs," I explained, trying to maintain my enthusiasm despite her evident disinterest. "That's nice," she replied with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dad, did I tell you Ryan's family is taking me to Aspen for spring break?" Just like that, the conversation shifted away from my achievement and back to Jessica's social life. It was a small moment, but it established a pattern that would continue for years. My successes were footnotes, while Jessica's life remained the main story in our family narrative. After graduation, I moved to Silicon Valley and joined a promising startup, as one of their first software engineers. The hours were brutal, but the equity package was generous, and I believed in the company's vision. Meanwhile, Jessica followed in our father's footsteps, majoring in finance at Boston University and landing an internship at his firm during her junior year. Our father couldn't have been prouder when Jessica joined his wealth management company full-time after graduation. Keeping it in the family, he'd say, showing her off to clients as the future of Collins financial advisors. By contrast, my career in tech remained somewhat mysterious to my parents, who dutifully nodded when I explained my latest project, but clearly didn't grasp the significance of my work. When our grandmother passed away 5 years ago, she left a modest inheritance to be split between Jessica and me. It wasn't life-changing money, about $60,000 each, but it represented her life savings and her love for us. I invested mine in my company's stock options and in a small condo in San Francisco. Jessica used hers as a down payment for a luxury condo in Boston's upscale Back Bay neighborhood, much closer to our parents than my West Coast life. Catherine is doing her own thing out in California with all those tech people, I'd overhear my mother tell her friends during my infrequent visits home. Jessica is just 15 minutes away. She comes over for Sunday dinners every week, helps your father with his clients. Such a blessing to have her close by. These comments stung, suggesting that my pursuit of my passion in Silicon Valley somehow made me less devoted to my family. But I was building something important, both in my career and in my growing network of friends and colleagues who valued my intelligence and drive rather than just my social graces. 2 years ago, my company went public. The IPO transformed my modest equity stake into substantial wealth, not billionaire status, but certainly millionaire territory. Suddenly, the years of 60-hour work weeks, missed holidays, and living in a showbox apartment paid off in a way my family could finally understand. I didn't make a show of my new financial status. I upgraded to a nicer condo in San Francisco, set up responsible investment accounts, donated to causes I cared about, and splurged on a few luxuries like a Tesla and some designer work clothes. I also sent my parents on a dream vacation to Italy for their 35th anniversary, something they'd always talked about, but never prioritized financially. Jessica's reaction to my newfound success was subtle but unmistakable. Her congratulatory message came 3 days after the IPO, a brief text that read, "Heard the big news. Congrats on the IPO. Guess those coding all-nighters paid off." No call, no questions about what this meant for me, no genuine excitement. When I visited home 6 months after the IPO, bringing thoughtful gifts for everyone, Jessica examined her Tiffany bracelet with a raised eyebrow. "Very Silicon Valley of you to think everything can be solved with money," she commented, even as she fastened it around her wrist. Little did I know then that behind her dismissive attitude toward my success lurked something far darker than simple sibling jealousy. The seeds of betrayal had already been planted, and they were about to bear bitter fruit. Last September, I flew back to Boston for our father's 60th birthday. I had been working remotely for weeks to ensure I could take a full 2 weeks off to celebrate properly. In true Collins family fashion, my mother had planned an elaborate dinner at Mentun, one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants. It was the kind of place where reservations were made months in advance, where the tasting menu had no prices listed, and where celebrities were rumored to dine when passing through the city. "Your father deserves the very best for this milestone," my mother explained when she told me about the reservation. Jessica helped me secure it through one of her clients who knows the owner. I arrived in Boston the day before the dinner and stayed at the Four Seasons rather than imposing on my parents or Jessica. The distance gave me space to prepare myself for the inevitable family dynamics and to wrap Dad's gift, a vintage Rolex Submariner he'd admired in a magazine years ago that I'd tracked down through Collector. The evening of the dinner, I dressed carefully in a black Chanel dress, understated but unmistakably luxurious, with simple pearl earrings that had belonged to our grandmother. I wasn't trying to show off, but I wanted to honor the occasion with appropriate elegance. When my Uber pulled up to the restaurant, Jessica and my parents were already waiting in the lobby. Finally, Jessica said, checking her watch though I was perfectly on time. "We thought you might be running on California time." She looked stunning as always in a red dress that highlighted her perfect figure, her blonde hair swept into an elaborate updo that must have taken hours. Next to her, I felt like the plain sister despite my designer dress. My father hugged me warmly. "There's my tech genius. God, I've missed you, sweetheart." "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, handing him the small wrapped box containing the Rolex. "Don't open it now, save it for after dinner." Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly at the tiny package, clearly calculating its potential value. Once seated at our prime table overlooking the Boston Harbor, the evening progressed pleasantly enough. My father regaled us with stories from his decades in finance, my mother fussed over the wine selections, and Jessica charmed the waitstaff with her practiced smile. I shared updates about my life in San Francisco, carefully editing out the more technical aspects of my work that I knew would make their eyes glaze over. "Catherine's company is working on some revolutionary AI integration," my father explained proudly to the sommelier, though I'd never used those exact words. "She's always been the brain of the family. And Jessica is the heart," my mother added quickly, as if to maintain balance. "She's taken over managing our biggest client accounts, hasn't she, dear?" Jessica nodded modestly. "It's nothing special. Just building relationships and trust." As the dinner progressed through multiple exquisite courses, I noticed Jessica ordering the most expensive options on the menu and suggesting a second bottle of Chateau Margaux that cost over $1,200. I didn't mind, this was a celebration, after all, and I could certainly afford it, but there was something calculated in the way she glanced at me each time she selected something extravagant. When my father opened my gift between the main course and dessert, his eyes welled with tears. "Catherine, this is the exact model I've wanted for years. How did you even remember?" "She probably just threw money at some assistant to find it," Jessica muttered, just loudly enough for me to hear, "but not our parents." I ignored the barb, focusing instead on my father's genuine joy, as he immediately replaced his everyday watch with the Submariner. After dessert and coffee, I reached for my purse as the waiter approached with the check. "This is my treat," I said, pulling out my American Express Centurion card, the infamous black card, that was invitation only and signified substantial wealth to those who recognized it. "Oh, Catherine, that's too generous," my mother protested weakly, though I could see she was relieved not to foot the bill for the evening, which had certainly climbed well into 4 figures. Jessica's eyes fixed on the black metal card as I handed it to the waiter. "Always the show-off," she said with a tight smile. "Stop pretending you're rich, Kat. We all know those tech valuations are mostly smoke and mirrors." I felt a flush of embarrassment at her calling me out, even though her assessment of my financial situation couldn't have been further from the truth. Before I could respond, the waiter returned with an uncomfortable expression. "I'm sorry, Ms. Collins, but your card has been declined," he said quietly, trying to be discreet. The table fell silent. Jessica's smirk widened into a full smile as she reached for her own wallet. "See what I mean? I've got this," she said, producing her own platinum card with a flourish. My mind raced. There was no way my card should be declined. I had more than enough credit and regularly paid off the balance in full. Something was wrong. "There must be some mistake," I said, pulling out my phone to check my Amex app. What I saw made my blood run cold. My most recent statement showed dozens of charges I didn't recognize, high-end shopping sprees at Saks Fifth Avenue, Bergdorf Goodman, and Neiman Marcus, first-class flights to Paris and London, luxury hotel stays, even a $50,000 charge from a yacht charter company in the Mediterranean. In total, there was over $550,000 in fraudulent charges, maxing out even the generous limit of my black card. "This isn't possible," I whispered, scrolling through transaction after transaction that I'd never made. "Someone's stolen my identity." "Sure they have," Jessica said with a roll of her eyes, handing her card to the waiting server. "Don't worry, little crisis averted. I've got more than enough to cover dinner." The waiter disappeared with Jessica's card while I frantically called the American Express fraud department, stepping away from the table to explain the situation. When I returned a few minutes later, still reeling from the apparent identity theft, Jessica was signing the receipt with a flourish. "All taken care of," she announced, but there was something in her expression, a flicker of worry beneath the triumph, that caught my attention. As we left the restaurant, my father put his arm around my shoulders. "Don't worry about the card issue, Catherine. These things happen. We'll sort it out." But as we said our goodbyes in front of the restaurant, Jessica avoided meeting my eyes directly. And when she hugged me, her whisper in my ear sent a chill down my spine, "Maybe stick to your tax bracket next time." That night in my hotel room, as I combed through the fraudulent charges more carefully, I noticed something that stopped me cold. All the transactions had one thing in common. They were made in cities and stores where I knew Jessica had been, based on her social media posts. The suspicion that began to form in my mind was too terrible to contemplate, but once the thought appeared, I couldn't shake it. Was my own sister stealing from me? The morning after the disastrous dinner, I cancelled my plans to sightsee with my parents and instead set up a makeshift investigation headquarters in my hotel room. I spread my credit card statements across the king-sized bed, created a timeline on the hotel notepad, and turned my laptop into a portal for digital detective work. My first call was to American Express's executive fraud department, where I spoke with a senior investigator named Marcus. I explained my suspicions, as painful as they were to articulate. "I believe my sister may be behind these charges," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "The timing and locations match her travel perfectly." Marcus was professionally sympathetic. "Unfortunately, Ms. Collins, family fraud is more common than you might think. We see cases like this frequently. What makes you suspect your sister specifically?" I explained how the transactions aligned with Jessica's known whereabouts based on her Instagram posts and stories. The $12,000 shopping spree at Bergdorf Goodman happened the same weekend Jessica had posted photos of herself brunching in New York. The charges at high-end boutiques in Paris coincided exactly with Jessica's spontaneous girls' trip to Europe 3 months ago. "We'll need to verify the card wasn't physically present for these transactions," Marcus explained. "Many high-end retailers require the actual card for large purchases." That's when another horrifying thought struck me. My backup card, I keep it in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, in a jewelry box in my old desk. Jessica would have had easy access. Marcus suggested I file a police report while they conducted their investigation. The thought of formally accusing my sister of theft made me physically ill, but I needed to protect myself. I asked for 48 hours to gather more evidence before involving law enforcement. Next, I called my bank and discovered something even more disturbing. Someone had attempted to open a line of credit in my name using my social security number 3 weeks earlier, but had been denied due to a security flag. The application had come from an IP address in Boston. With shaking hands, I logged into my investment accounts. While my main portfolio seemed untouched, I discovered that a joint account I'd set up with my parents intended to help with their eventual retirement had been systematically drained over the past year. Nearly $200,000 was gone, with transfers made to an account I didn't recognize. My mind reeled with implications. Jessica worked in finance. She knew how to navigate these systems, how to execute transfers that wouldn't immediately trigger fraud alerts. And as our father's colleague, she likely had access to family financial information that others wouldn't. I needed more concrete proof before confronting her. Taking a deep breath, I called my father, asking if I could stop by his office later that afternoon to discuss something important. "Of course, sweetheart," he said, concern evident in his voice. "Is this about the credit card issue?" "Don't worry about that for a second. It's related," I said vaguely. "I'll explain everything later." Colin's financial advisors occupied half a floor in a sleek downtown building. As I rode the elevator up, I rehearsed what to say, how to ask the difficult questions without revealing my suspicions prematurely. Jessica's office was next to my father's, but fortunately, according to the receptionist, she was out at a client meeting. My father welcomed me with a warm hug, but his smile faltered when he saw my serious expression. "What's going on, Catherine? You look like you haven't slept." "Dad, I need to check something in the family accounts," I said directly. "There are some discrepancies I'm concerned about." His brow furrowed. "What kind of discrepancies?" I explained about the fraudulent charges on my credit card and my suspicion that my identity had been compromised. "I didn't mention Jessica, not yet. Can we look at the activity on the family trust account? And maybe Grandma's inheritance distributions? I just want to make sure everything is secure." Though clearly confused, my father logged into the company's secure system. As he navigated through the family accounts, his expression changed from confusion to concern to outright alarm. "This isn't right," he muttered, clicking through transaction histories. "These transfers. I never authorized these." Together, we discovered that beyond the $200,000 missing from the joint account I'd created, another $300,000 had been siphoned from my parents' retirement fund through a complex series of transfers disguised as investment reallocations. All had been executed under my father's advisor code, but outside his normal working hours. Who could have done this? I asked softly, knowing the answer but needing my father to reach the conclusion himself. He stared at the screen, his face ashen. "Only 2 people have this level of access to our family accounts. Me and..." The office door opened, and Jessica walked in, stopping abruptly when she saw me sitting across from our father. She was impeccably dressed in a designer suit, her hair perfectly styled, the picture of professional success. But the color drained from her face as she registered the statements open on the computer screen. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice unnaturally high. My father turned the monitor so she could see it clearly. "Jessica, do you know anything about these transfers? They were made using my advisor code, but I didn't make them." Her composure cracked almost imperceptibly, a slight twitch at the corner of her mouth, a momentary widening of her eyes. Then the mask slipped back into place. "Dad, I'm sure there's a simple explanation. Maybe a system error or..." "And what about the charges on Catherine's credit card?" he interrupted, his voice hardening. "Over $500,000 in fraudulent transactions that mysteriously match your travel schedule." Jessica's eyes darted between us, calculating. I could almost see her mind racing, searching for a plausible explanation. Finally, she sighed and closed the office door behind her. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under," she said quietly. "Catherine has everything: the successful career, the money, the freedom. Do you know what it's like working here, Dad, always in your shadow, never measuring up? Meanwhile, perfect Catherine strikes gold in Silicon Valley without even trying." "Without trying?" I echoed incredulously. "I worked 80-hour weeks for years. I missed holidays, birthdays, lived in a studio apartment eating ramen while you were enjoying your luxury condo and posting about champagne brunches." "It was supposed to be temporary," Jessica continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Just borrowing to keep up appearances, to maintain the lifestyle clients expect from someone in my position. I was going to pay it all back when my investments matured." My father's face had turned from ashen to crimson. "You stole from your family. From your sister, from your mother and me. How much in total, Jessica? How much have you taken? Jessica looked down at her perfectly manicured hands. About $550,000, give or take. The number hung in the air between us. Over $500,000, drained from family accounts and charged to my credit cards to fund Jessica's facade of success. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why not just ask for help if you were struggling? Her eyes flashed with sudden anger. Ask you for handouts. Become the charity case sister who couldn't make it on her own. No thanks. As the full extent of her betrayal became clear, I felt a strange sense of calm descend. This wasn't just about money. This was about years of resentment, jealousy, and a fundamental breach of trust that could never be repaired. We need to call the police, my father said, reaching for the phone. Jessica's facade finally shattered completely. You can't be serious. Dad, it's me, your daughter, your legacy at the firm. Think about the scandal, what this would do to your reputation. As my father hesitated, torn between justice and protecting the family name, I realized the next steps I took would change our family forever. The next 48 hours unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare. After the confrontation in my father's office, we moved the discussion to my parents' home, away from the prying eyes and ears of colleagues at the firm. My mother collapsed into sobs when we explained what Jessica had done, while my father alternated between stunned silence and explosive anger. Jessica's defense evolved as the hours passed. First came denial, the transfers were authorized investments, then minimization, it's not like Catherine can't afford it. Followed by deflection, you always loved her more anyway, and finally, tearful remorse that rang hollow after all the lies. I never meant for it to go this far, she wept as we sat around the kitchen table that night, financial statements and credit card bills spread before us like evidence at a crime scene. It started small, just a few charges here and there to keep up with my friends, to maintain the image expected of a Collins financial advisor. An image you couldn't afford, my father said flatly, looking at her with eyes that had aged a decade in a day. The clients expect a certain lifestyle, Jessica insisted. They want to entrust their millions to someone successful, someone who lives the life they aspire to. I couldn't tell them my condo was mortgaged to the hilt, that I was drowning in student debt while Catherine was buying Teslas and designer clothes. I felt a surge of indignation. I earned everything I have. And I never flaunted it or made you feel less than. You didn't have to, Jessica snapped. Every time you visited with your casual mentions of stock options, and your black card, and your Silicon Valley connections, I felt like a failure. Dad introduces me as the future of Collins Financial while I can barely make my credit card minimums. Do you have any idea what that's like? The raw honesty of this admission silenced me momentarily. Had I been insensitive to her struggles? Had my success, however hard-earned, cast a shadow over her life? But then I remembered the methodical way she'd stolen from not just me, but our parents as well, and my empathy evaporated. So you decided to punish me by stealing my identity and draining Mom and Dad's retirement fund? I asked incredulously. I was going to pay it back, Jessica repeated, the mantra of embezzlers throughout history. I have investments that will mature soon. There's a client who promised me a huge commission on a deal that's closing next month. My father laughed bitterly. There is no big commission, Jessica. I've seen all the pending deals. You're not even meeting your basic targets. This revelation seemed to stun even Jessica into silence. That night, I stayed in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling as I had during teenage crises that now seemed quaint by comparison. The jewelry box where I'd kept my backup credit card sat on the desk, a painful reminder of the trust I'd placed in family bonds. Sleep eluded me as I cycled through emotions, betrayal, anger, grief, and underneath it all, a persistent question: what happens next? By morning, decisions needed to be made. American Express was awaiting my final word on whether to press charges for credit card fraud. The bank needed to know if I wanted to pursue the identity theft case. And my father faced the grim task of deciding how to handle the situation at Collins Financial, where Jessica's actions could potentially constitute securities fraud. We reconvened in the living room, all of us hollow-eyed from sleepless night. My mother had aged overnight, her usually perfect appearance disheveled, her hands shaking as she clutched her coffee mug. My father looked grim but resolute. Jessica entered last, her face carefully made up as though proper contouring could somehow mask the gravity of what she'd done. "I've spoken with the firm's attorneys," my father began without preamble. "The situation is untenable, Jessica. You used your position and access to commit financial crimes. At minimum, you'll need to resign immediately." Jessica blanched. "Dad, please. My whole career." "Your career in finance is over," he interrupted, his voice firm despite the pain evident in his eyes. "The only question now is whether it ends with quiet resignation or criminal charges." "You'd send your own daughter to prison," she whispered, tears welling. "That depends on Catherine," he replied, turning to me. "The largest theft was from her accounts. It's her decision whether to involve the authorities." All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of family legacy and personal justice colliding in my chest. What Jessica had done was unforgivable, not just the theft itself, but the calculated way she'd executed it, and the ease with which she'd lied to our faces for years. The legal path forward was clear: report the crimes, let her face the consequences of her actions. She'd committed felony fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. She deserved to face justice. But as I looked at her, my little sister who'd once shared my secrets and borrowed my clothes, I saw something beneath the entitlement and resentment. I saw fear. Real, primal fear. "Here's what's going to happen," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. "You're going to resign from Dad's firm today. You'll sign a legally binding agreement to repay everything you've stolen, on a payment plan we'll establish with lawyers present. You'll attend financial therapy and regular counseling. You'll sell the luxury condo, the designer wardrobe, and anything else purchased with stolen funds. And you'll do it all without complaint or evasion." "And if I refuse?" Jessica asked, a last flicker of defiance in her eyes. "Then I call the police right now, press all available charges, and you spend the next 5 to 10 years in federal prison for wire fraud and identity theft," I said simply. "Your choice." The room fell silent as Jessica absorbed her options. Finally, she nodded once, defeat etched in every line of her face. "I'll do it," she whispered. "I'll pay everything back." "There's more," I continued. "You need to understand that trust is broken, Jessica. I'm not doing this to save you from consequences, I'm doing it to spare our parents the public scandal and pain of having their daughter prosecuted. But make no mistake, you and we're done." My mother gasped softly. "Catherine, surely with time." "No, Mom," I interrupted gently but firmly. "Some betrayals can't be undone. Jessica didn't just steal money, she systematically violated my trust for years. She watched me panic when my card was declined and enjoyed my humiliation. She's been living a lie at all our expense. I'll coordinate with her through lawyers to arrange repayment, but our relationship as sisters is over." Jessica began to cry in earnest now, perhaps finally understanding the full cost of her actions. "Kat, please. We're family. You can't just. You should have thought about family before you stole $500,000 from us," I said, rising to my feet. "I need some air." I walked out to the backyard where we'd played as children, where we'd shared ice cream cones and secrets, built snowmen and summer forts. The wooden swing set was long gone, replaced by my mother's carefully tended garden, but the memories lingered. I sat on the stone bench beneath the old oak tree and finally allowed myself to cry, not just for the money, which was ultimately replaceable, but for the sister I'd lost long before I knew she was gone. Hey everyone, I need to take a moment here. This part of the story is so hard to relive, even now. If you're connecting with this family drama, please hit that like button to let me know I'm not alone in experiencing betrayal from those closest to me. Have you ever had to cut ties with a family member? The pain is indescribable, isn't it? I promise to continue this story in just a moment, and trust me, you'll want to see what happens next when karma finally catches up to Jessica. Stay with me. The fallout from Jessica's betrayal was swift and severe. Within a week, she had cleared out her office at Collins Financial, telling colleagues she was pursuing other opportunities, while my father managed damage control behind the scenes. She listed her luxury condo for sale and moved into a modest apartment in a less prestigious neighborhood. Her social media accounts, once showcasing a glamorous lifestyle of champagne brunches and designer shopping sprees, fell conspicuously silent. I returned to San Francisco after ensuring all the legal paperwork was in order. A team of lawyers had drawn up a restitution agreement that required Jessica to repay the full $550,000 over 5 years, with monthly payments automatically deducted from her new bank account that I could monitor remotely. Any default would trigger immediate legal action. It was harsh but necessary given the magnitude of her betrayal. For the first month, Jessica complied with all requirements. She secured a job as an administrative assistant at an insurance company, the only position she could find without references from her previous employer. She sold her designer handbags and jewelry through consignment shops. She attended weekly therapy sessions as mandated by our agreement. My parents provided progress reports during our Sunday calls, their voices strained with the effort of neutrality. "She's trying, Catherine," my mother said during one such call in November. "She asks about you every time she visits." "I'm glad she's complying," I replied evenly. But I meant what I said. Our relationship is over. My father, ever the pragmatist, respected my boundaries more readily than my mother. "Jessica made her choices," he said simply. "Now she lives with them." By December, cracks began to appear in Jessica's redemption narrative. She missed a therapy appointment, then another. She was late to Sunday dinner with our parents, arriving with alcohol on her breath. The first payment under our agreement arrived 3 days late, accompanied by a rambling email about unfair financial hardship and how the payment schedule was vindictive punishment. I forwarded the email to our lawyers without response. The terms were non-negotiable. Around Christmas, Jessica launched what my mother later described as a charm offensive, sending me daily texts and emails reminiscing about our childhood, attaching photos of us as little girls building snowmen or opening presents together. "Remember when we were real sisters," one message read. "Before money and success came between us." The irony wasn't lost on me. It wasn't success that had come between us, it was her theft and betrayal. I didn't respond to any of these overtures, which only intensified her efforts. In January, she showed up at my condo in San Francisco unannounced, having somehow convinced the doorman to let her up. I was in the middle of a video conference when my doorbell rang repeatedly. When I answered, Jessica stood there with red-rimmed eyes and a desperate smile. "Surprise," she said with forced brightness. "I thought we could have sister time, face to face. Really talk this through." I felt a complex wave of emotions: shock at her audacity, anger at the intrusion, and underneath it all, a dull ache of grief for what we'd lost. "There's nothing to talk through," I said, not inviting her in. "The agreement is clear. Make your payments, fulfill your obligations, and we'll have no need for direct contact." "For God's sake, Kat, I'm your sister," she cried, her composure cracking. "Yes, I made a horrible mistake. I was jealous and stupid and wrong. But do you have to be so cold? So unforgiving? This wasn't a mistake, Jessica. A mistake is a momentary lapse in judgment. You systematically stole from me and our parents for years. You watched me panic when my card was declined and you enjoyed it. That wasn't a mistake, it was a revelation of who you truly are. Her face crumpled. So that's it. One terrible decision, and I lose my sister forever. It wasn't one decision. It was hundreds of decisions, made day after day, month after month. Each time you used my card, each time you transferred money from our parents' accounts, you chose betrayal. Jessica's shoulders slumped in defeat. What do I need to do to fix this? Tell me, and I'll do it. Just honor the agreement. That's all I expect from you now. When I closed the door on her tearful face, I felt no satisfaction, only a hollow certainty that I was protecting myself from someone who had proven unworthy of trust. After the San Francisco confrontation, Jessica's compliance with our agreement deteriorated rapidly. February's payment arrived a week late. March's payment never came at all. My lawyers sent a formal warning, which prompted a hostile email from Jessica accusing me of financial terrorism and claiming that the repayment schedule was literally impossible to maintain on her current salary. Maybe if you'd shared some of your Silicon Valley millions instead of lording your success over me, none of this would have happened, she wrote. But you've always been selfish, Catherine. Always had to prove you're better than everyone. I didn't dignify this with a response, simply instructing my lawyers to proceed with the consequences outlined in our agreement. This meant freezing the small trust fund Jessica still had access to and informing her that any further non-compliance would result in criminal charges being filed. The threat worked temporarily. April and May payments arrived on time, accompanied by terse notes indicating they were made under duress. My parents reported that Jessica had stopped coming to Sunday dinners, claiming she was too busy working multiple jobs to maintain the repayment schedule I'd cruelly imposed. In June, I received a tearful call from my mother. Jessica's been let go from her job, she said. Apparently she was caught trying to access confidential client financial information. She says it's a misunderstanding, but I don't know what to believe anymore. The news didn't surprise me. Leopards don't change their spots, they just seek new hunting grounds. By late summer, Jessica had spiraled further. According to my parents, she'd moved to an even cheaper apartment, was working as a bartender at a downtown hotel, and had developed a concerning habit of dating wealthy older men who funded brief periods of renewed luxury before inevitably discovering her true nature. In September, exactly 1 year after the fateful dinner where her betrayal had been exposed, Jessica made her final desperate play. She created a GoFundMe campaign titled Victim of Family Financial Abuse, where she painted herself as the wronged party, a hard-working financial advisor whose wealthy tech executive sister was vindictively demanding excessive repayment for a few borrowed dollars. The campaign featured carefully edited screenshots of our text exchanges, photos of her tiny apartment contrasted with social media images of my San Francisco condo, and a tearful video where she claimed I was destroying her life out of jealousy and spite. It might have gained traction, except that Jessica had overlooked one crucial detail. In her rush to rewrite history, several of her former colleagues from Collins Financial saw the campaign. People who knew exactly why she'd left the firm, who had watched my father struggle to repair the damage her actions had caused to client accounts. Within hours, the comment section filled with corrections from people with first-hand knowledge of her crimes. The campaign was removed within 48 hours, but not before screenshots had circulated widely among Boston's close-knit financial community. Jessica's last attempt at redemption had instead cemented her reputation as a manipulative fraud. The next day, I received an unexpected call from my father. "Jessica's leaving Boston," he said without preamble. "Says there's nothing left for her here. She's moving to Chicago to start fresh, where no one knows her history." I felt a complex mixture of relief and sadness. Maybe that's for the best. She wants to know if she can make a clean break, if you'll accept a much smaller total repayment, and let her walk away. I considered this briefly. The money was never the point, Dad. It was the betrayal. Tell her the agreement stands. She can make payments from Chicago as easily as from Boston. There was a long pause before my father spoke again, his voice heavy with finality. I told her you'd say that. I think she's really gone this time, Catherine. From all of our lives. As I hung up the phone, I realized this was the true end of my relationship with my sister, not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet, inevitable fading away. The sister I thought I had was gone, and the person who remained was someone I neither knew nor wanted to know. 3 years passed. I threw myself into work, developed new friendships in San Francisco, and gradually healed from the family trauma. My parents and I reached a new equilibrium. We spoke weekly, visited several times a year, and carefully navigated around the Jessica-shaped hole in our family narrative. She had indeed moved to Chicago, and, true to form, had made exactly 3 monthly payments before disappearing completely. My lawyers attempted to track her down, but reported that she'd left no forwarding address. Her social media accounts were deleted. She'd effectively vanished. I had the legal right to pursue criminal charges, but chose not to. The emotional cost of dragging the ordeal back into the light seemed greater than any justice I might achieve. I wrote off the remaining debt, considerable, but ultimately not life-altering for me, and focused on moving forward. My company continued to thrive. I was promoted to Chief Technology Officer and featured in Forbes' 40 Under 40 list. The article included a brief mention of my philanthropic work establishing coding scholarships for underprivileged girls. I didn't read the comments. Last spring, I received an unexpected email from Collins Financial's general inbox, presumably sent there because the sender didn't have my personal contact information. The subject line read simply, "Regarding Jessica Collins." My finger hovered over the delete button. I had no interest in reopening old wounds. But curiosity prevailed, and I opened the message. "Dear Miss Collins," it began. "My name is Eleanor Winters. I don't know if Jessica ever mentioned me, but I was her roommate in Chicago for about a year. I'm writing because I recently discovered something that belongs to you, and I believe you should have it." The email explained that Jessica had abruptly moved out of their shared apartment 18 months earlier, leaving behind several boxes she promised to collect but never did. After waiting a year, Eleanor had finally decided to clear out the storage closet and discovered a journal with my name written inside the cover. "Normally I would never read someone else's private writings," Eleanor wrote, "but I needed to figure out who Catherine was in order to return it. What I found inside makes me think you might want to see it. Please let me know if you'd like me to send it to you." I debated internally before replying with my address, half expecting never to hear from Eleanor again. But 2 weeks later, a small package arrived containing a leather-bound journal I recognized immediately, a gift from my parents when I left for college. I hadn't seen it in years and had assumed it was lost during one of my moves. The mystery of how Jessica had obtained it was instantly overshadowed by the question of what she'd written in it. That evening, after a glass of wine to steady my nerves, I opened the journal. The first half contained my original entries from college, typical freshman year musings about classes, new friends, and the excitement of independence. But halfway through, the handwriting changed. Jessica had appropriated my journal and transformed it into a record of her crimes. The entries began 3 years before the credit card incident, around the time she'd joined our father's firm. They detailed not just a theft from me and our parents, but a comprehensive catalogue of financial misdeeds I hadn't known about: fraudulent transactions using client funds, fabricated investment returns, forged signatures on documents. Jessica had been operating a small-scale Ponzi scheme within Collins Financial, using new client investments to cover her misappropriation of funds from established accounts. Even more disturbing were her explicit descriptions of resentment toward me. Catherine thinks she's so special with her Silicon Valley success, one entry read. She has no idea how easy she's had it, how hard I've had to work just to appear half as successful. Taking her money feels like justice. Like finally balancing the scales. Page after page revealed the calculated nature of her betrayal. She'd stolen my backup credit card 2 years before she began using it, waiting for the perfect moment to exploit it. She'd systematically catalogued my investments, account numbers, and even my social security number, building a dossier of financial information she could leverage. Most chillingly, she had outlined a contingency plan to blame our father for the missing client funds if her schemes were ever discovered. She had collected emails and documents that, taken out of context, might implicate him in her crimes. Dad always chose Catherine as the favorite, she wrote. He deserves to take the fall if everything collapses. I felt physically ill reading these entries, realizing how narrowly our father had escaped being framed by his own daughter. I immediately called my parents, explaining what I'd discovered. There's more, my father said after a long silence. Something we didn't tell you because it seemed pointless to add to the pain. He explained that 6 months after Jessica moved to Chicago, the firm had received inquiries from federal investigators regarding irregularities in several client accounts, irregularities that predated the discovery of Jessica's theft from our family. My father had been forced to conduct an internal audit that revealed the full extent of her financial crimes. We cooperated fully with the investigation, he said. Provided all the evidence that Jessica had acted alone. The firm took a significant hit. We had to reimburse clients for their losses, but we survived. The investigators have been trying to locate Jessica, but she's disappeared completely. Until now, I said, looking down at the journal with its damning evidence in Jessica's own handwriting. After consulting with lawyers, I made copies of the relevant journal pages and forwarded them to the federal investigators. Within days, I received a call from Special Agent Diana Chen. This journal is the missing piece we needed, she explained. We've been building a case against your sister for years, but without hard evidence of intent, prosecution would have been challenging. These writings demonstrate premeditation and malice. Do you know where she is? I asked. We have reason to believe she's operating under an alias in Miami, Agent Chen said. These journal entries give us grounds for a warrant. Ms. Collins, would you be willing to testify if this case goes to trial? The question gave me pause. I had spent years trying to move beyond the trauma of Jessica's betrayal. Participating in a trial would mean revisiting that pain in the most public way possible. But I thought of my father, who had nearly been framed for his daughter's crimes. I thought of the clients whose trust had been violated. And I thought of the Jessica revealed in those journal pages, not a sister who had made a mistake, but a predator who had targeted her own family without remorse. Yes, I said finally. I'll testify. 2 weeks later, I received another call from Agent Chen. Jessica had been arrested at a beachfront condo in Miami, where she'd been living under the name Jennifer Carter. She had been working at a boutique financial services firm catering to wealthy retirees, a position she'd obtained using forged credentials and references. The condo was registered to a man named Richard Barlow, a 68-year-old widower, whose accounts showed suspicious transfers similar to those Jessica had made from our family funds. When agents interviewed him, he was shocked to learn Jennifer's true identity and the fact that nearly $300,000 had been siphoned from his accounts over the past year. We found evidence that she was planning to move on soon, Agent Chen told me. Passport applications under yet another alias, inquiries about banking laws in countries without extradition treaties. If we hadn't located her when we did. The implication was clear: Jessica would have disappeared again, leaving another victim in her wake. Jessica's trial took place last winter in a federal courthouse in Boston. I testified for the prosecution, providing a composed but damning account of her systematic theft from our family and the elaborate web of lies she had constructed to cover her tracks. The journal proved to be the prosecution's most powerful evidence. Jessica's own words, documenting her crimes and her callous attitude toward her victims, left no room for the jury to doubt her guilt or her understanding of the harm she was causing. Her defense attorney attempted to portray her as a victim of financial pressure and familial neglect, driven to desperate measures by the competitive shadow of her successful sister. But this narrative collapsed under the weight of evidence showing the calculated, years-long nature of her schemes and the multiple victims beyond our family. In the end, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on all counts: wire fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, and financial exploitation of an elder. The judge, noting the premeditated nature of the crimes and Jessica's lack of genuine remorse, sentenced her to 8 years in federal prison and ordered restitution to all her victims. As Jessica was led from the courtroom, she looked at me one last time. There was no anger in her expression, no defiance, only a hollow emptiness that suggested she still didn't fully comprehend the gravity of what she had done, or the justice in her punishment. My parents, who had attended every day of the trial despite the obvious pain it caused them, approached me outside the courthouse. "It's finally over," my mother said, embracing me with tears in her eyes. "We can all begin to heal now." My father, who had aged visibly during the ordeal, squeezed my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Catherine. Hard as it was, you did what needed to be done." We went to dinner together that night, not at an expensive restaurant, but at the small Italian place where we had celebrated family milestones throughout my childhood. As we shared pasta and memories, carefully navigating around the Jessica-shaped void at our table, I felt the first real stirrings of peace. In the months since the trial, I've reflected deeply on what happened with my sister. The easy explanation would be that Jessica was simply greedy or jealous, that she coveted the financial success I had achieved. But the reality, as revealed in her journal and throughout the investigation, was more complex. Jessica had constructed her entire identity around being the special one, the naturally gifted daughter, who effortlessly charmed everyone. When my success challenged that narrative, success built on hard work rather than social grace, something fundamental broke in her self-image. Rather than adapt or find her own authentic path, she chose to create an illusion of success through theft and deception. The tragedy is that Jessica was genuinely talented. She had natural people skills that could have made her successful in countless legitimate ways. But she wanted the shortcuts, the appearance of achievement without the substance behind it. In the end, she lost everything: her career, her freedom, her family, chasing a facade that was never going to fulfill her. My parents visit her in prison occasionally. I don't. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. But I have forgiven her, not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying the weight of anger and betrayal was exhausting, and releasing it has been liberating. My life today is rich in ways Jessica never understood. My work continues to challenge and fulfill me. I've established a foundation that provides technology education for underprivileged girls, trying to create pathways to success for young women who have none of the advantages Jessica and I took for granted. I've found joy in simplicity: weekend hikes in the California hills, dinner parties with friends who value me for who I am rather than what I've achieved, quiet evenings reading books that expand my understanding of the world. The money Jessica stole has been partially repaid through asset seizures, though the full amount may never be recovered. But that loss taught me something valuable: true wealth isn't measured in bank balances or black cards. It's found in integrity, in authentic connections, in creating value rather than extracting it. Sometimes I wonder what will happen when Jessica completes her sentence. Will she emerge changed, having learned from the consequences of her actions? Or will she simply find new targets, new identities to assume, new illusions to construct? I hope for the former, but have prepared myself for the latter. What I know with certainty is that I won't be waiting to find out. I've established boundaries that will protect me from future betrayal, and I've surrounded myself with people whose values align with mine. The painful lesson of Jessica's betrayal has made me wiser about who I trust and why. In that restaurant where my card was declined 3 years ago, Jessica mocked me for pretending to be rich. The irony, of course, is that she was the one pretending not just to wealth, but to integrity, to familial love, to being someone worthy of trust. The declined card didn't reveal my pretense, it revealed hers. As I look toward the future, I carry with me the understanding that some people will value you only for what they can take from you. But I also carry the knowledge that such people are the exception, not the rule. Most relationships are built on genuine connection rather than calculation. Most people are worthy of the trust we place in them. My sister wasn't. And that's a loss I've had to accept. But in losing a sister who never truly existed except in my hopes, I've gained clarity about what matters in life and who deserves a place in mine. So there it is, my story of betrayal and its aftermath. If you've experienced family betrayal like I have, please know you're not alone. There's healing on the other side of even the deepest wounds. I'd love to hear your thoughts or similar experiences in the comments below. Did karma catch up to someone who wronged you? How did you move forward after betrayal? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about family dynamics, healing, and growth. Share this with someone who might be struggling with similar family drama. Sometimes knowing others have walked the same path makes the journey less lonely. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember that while we can't choose our family, we can choose how we respond to their actions and who we become in the aftermath. Wishing you all the strength to face your own family challenges and the wisdom to learn from them.